The first thing we need to do, we need to have a motion and a second to allow Sharon Williams to participate with us by telephone. Motion by Betty. Second by Matt. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to our next item is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting of January the 3rd. And need a motion on that. Motion by Betty, seconded by Terry. And does anybody have any corrections or changes in the minutes of our last meeting? Being no response, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Sharon. Next on the agenda will be our informational items. And the first one, Brian Johnson from the Greater Peoria Sanitary District, our director down there. Brian, you can bring us up to date on anything new. The report is in our pamphlet, so we're on your
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
iPads or whatever you want to call. I brought my iPad, but I don't know if I got it on there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The minutes in your pack are the December minutes from the Sanitary District. I see a sewer lining project that we put out for bid and let. We do one of these about once every year or more frequently as needed. Several items or several areas throughout our service area, including some work with an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Peoria. So if anyone's interested in the locations, I can email them a map of those later. Just let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions for this or any of the other numerous projects we have going on. Thank you.
My question for you, Brian, is in just about the next to last paragraph, it says that you want to extend the TIF district to downtown stadium. Are you talking about the baseball stadium?
Right. The city of Peoria has a TIF district for the downtown stadium area and requested our support in a support letter for an extension of that, as many agencies did. So we issued a support letter for that project. But that's a city of Peoria item.
Oh, okay. Because when I think of a stadium, I think of Peoria Stadium out on War Memorial Drive, and I thought, well, maybe he means the baseball stadium.
Yep. Baseball stadium.
Okay. Anyone with any questions for Brian?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Brian. Our next item on the agenda is our facilities master plan, and we have Mark Little. I thought I saw Mark sitting back. Yeah, there you are, Mark. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Few updates from last month. If you notice on the list, I've added some of the larger projects that we're currently working on and issues. The first one on the list for the courthouse is the public defender and IT remodel. That was passed by the county board at their last meeting. At the time I put this together, I did not have a start date, but today I do. They're going to get started on the new public defender space a week from today. So that'll all get started for demolition a week from today. The estimate is 2 to 3 weeks to demo that area, and then they'll move down to the IT space. So we continue to look at a time frame to complete the project of about at least 6 months. So I think that would probably be the August, September time frame. So hopefully by then. Couple new ones on here. At the jail, we've got what are called CUVs in the jail kitchen. And those provide heating and cooling to that area. There's 4 of those that are roof mounted. And basically all 4 of those are not functional at the moment. One of them's kind of providing a little bit of heat, and one of them can provide some cooling. So we're currently looking at what we're going to do with those. They need to be replaced. We're getting some options on replacements of those and the possibility of taking some parts off of one and rebuilding one. So it's not as impactful right now because it sits in the middle of the jail, which keeps it warm, but once it starts to get warm outside, it does cause a problem because it will have no cooling in the kitchen. We're also using space heaters in the kitchen right now to keep it warm when it does get really cold. So yeah, none of those are functional at the moment, and so we've got to look at a solution to get those fixed. And another new one from the jail is jail has 4 water softeners. 2 of those have completely failed, and they're old and original, and one of them is starting to fail, which means we need to look at replacement of the water softeners. We are looking at a single device that potentially can replace all of those right now. We're waiting on quotes to come in. We've got quotes on the water softener itself. We're waiting on the labor part of that. The other ones, I don't have a whole lot of updates on the other one. A lot of them are still waiting on quotes on stuff. The one all the way at the bottom, the boiler burner here, upgrade here at the courthouse. If you've noticed the rule trucks out there today, that has finally arrived and it is installed on the boiler, and they're going to be finishing that up in the next couple days. So that new higher efficiency boiler burner will be completed. If you remember, that is something that Ameren is paying the bill 100% on the installation of that. So lots going on. If you have any questions, if I can't answer them, Calvin's here and he can help out. So.
Mark, last month you had said that there was a boiler problem out at the jail. Now, has that been corrected?
No, it's going to need to be replaced. We've got some cost on a new boiler. We're waiting on labor cost right now. That's the piece we don't have.
Anyone with a question in regards to Mark's report and so forth, or something that you have come up with in the past? Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, getting into our resolutions. Our first resolution is an intergovernmental agreement, and we need a motion on that. Motioned by Betty, seconded by Terry. And we have Jeff. Jeff is going to handle this for the Highway Department. Go ahead, Jeff.
This is the intergovernmental agreement with Limestone Road District to rehabilitate the bridge on Pfeiffer Road. It's designated structure number 072-5507. It's about a mile west of the village of Bartonville. It's 117 foot long, 3-span precast pre-stressed concrete deck beams. Bridge was originally constructed in 1980, but it has a sufficiency rating of 42.1. It's also one of the busiest township roads in the county with 1,200 cars per day. The deck beams are cracked and spalled, and pier caps are also spalled. We'd like to go in and rehabilitate the bridge, replace the deck beams, patch the concrete that's broken, replace the slope wall underneath with riprap when we're done, and then put the beams back on it. There are $289,450 in township bridge program funds available for this project. Also, Limestone Road District wants to utilize a little under $134,000 of their Rebuild Illinois funds for the project. And this is a very common intergovernmental agreement for us, where we do a cost share with the townships for these bridges at 50-50 after all state monies available is used up. So we're looking, the county cost for entire project would be about $350,000.
Now, when you talk about this bridge, this is on beyond that Wheatfield subdivision?
I believe so, yes. If you go by Limestone High School on Pfeiffer Road, it's the right side of the Y, and you go down there about another mile.
Okay, all right. Anyone with any questions?
Phil, I have a
Y-
question.
Yes, Betty?
Okay, I noticed you all speak of the as that temporary road to divert your traffic to away from the bridge while the repair's being done.
Yes.
Will it be what I want to say necessary to maintain that road once the bridge work is completed?
Maintain the detour?
Yes.
Okay, so we will use a county highway, we'll use the county highways as a detour, so we're already maintaining those, so it won't be any additional work at all for us. Does that answer your question?
And then you divert on seems like a back road or something other,
Actually,
and gravel it. You'll need to cover the graveling.
that's for Duncan Road Bridge. This
Oh,
one is
that's the
out-
Duncan.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is out by Limestone,
Okay.
Bartonville area. This detour will be on Lancaster
Lincoln,
Road.
okay.
And then back over to Cameron Lane.
All
So,
right. I got the different bridges.
Yep.
All
different
right. Thank
bridges.
you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Be no more questions? For the vote on the resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to our next resolution, which has to do with hiring an engineering firm for the one that we just adopted. Need a motion and second on this. Motion by Betty, seconded by Matt. Go ahead, Jeff.
So this is the engineering agreement to do the actual design work of the project for Pfeiffer Road Bridge. The township requested we use Hanson Professional Services, and we have a good relationship with them, so we didn't have any issues with that. The agreement will be for $168,900. As I mentioned before, the township wants to use the Rebuild Illinois funds, and there is a deadline to use those funds. So we're going to use all of their township funds, township rebuild funds on the engineering, and then what is left over will be split evenly between the county and the township.
So what you're saying is the cost, that $34,000 and some dollars, we're just gonna split that, okay. Anyone with any questions? All those in favor of adopting this resolution signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to our next resolution, which is another intergovernmental agreement, and we need to have a motion on this one, please. Motion by Betty, seconded by Dylan. And Jeff, you're going to handle this one, I believe.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, so a few months ago, the board approved a resolution an engineering agreement to rehabilitate Duncan Road Bridge, which is only about a half mile from the Stark County line. It's pretty rural up there. The roads are not in the best shape up there, the surrounding roads. We are using federal funds for the bridge rehabilitation. It's also a lot less money to close a bridge, detour traffic. It's a lot less money, and it takes a lot less time to do it that way. So I did a little adventure up there, crossed all the roadways, and determined that County Line Road, Street Meadow Road, and Princeville Cemetery roads were the best routes and the best condition roads to use for a detour. Again, I want to stress that this is a federal project, so IDOT will look at us and say, where are you putting your traffic? Also, the traffic does have to go somewhere, so even if we just close the road, the traffic's going to go on these roads anyway. So to alleviate and try to take care of future problems with road commissioners and extra traffic on the roads they weren't expecting, we reached out to them to get the permission to use these roads. County Line Road is gravel. Princeville Cemetery, half of it is gravel. Essex Township, that's this interim agreement. He was planning on adding some gravel to his road this spring anyway. So after he gets his road graveled and gets it shaped up, we will come in and we'll seal coat it this summer in preparation for the bridge job in '24. We may have to touch, depending on when he gets his gravel done, his grading done, we may have to do a final grade before we seal coat it, but that won't take us very long to do that, so. We're estimating it'll cost about $20,000. We'll use our own forces to do the grading and to seal coat the road, so.
How long is that gravel road?
It's about a mile long.
What?
About a mile long.
About a mile long. Okay. And I'd ask you for the same amount that cemetery. I know that's in our next motion, but you could tell me right now, and I won't have to ask the question next time.
That's about a half a mile of gravel.
About a
on
half
that
a
road.
mile. Okay.
Half of that road is seal coated, and the other half, north half, is only graveled.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All those in favor of adopting the resolution signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to our next resolution, has to do with basically some of the same things, only it deals, of course, with Princeville. I need a motion on this. Motion by Matt, seconded by Betty.
So this is essentially the same thing, but with Princeville Road District. Princeville Cemetery, as I stated earlier, half of it is gravel and half of it is seal coat. The road commission and I went up there last week and dug down to see how much gravel was there, and there's only looking like there's just barely 6 inches of gravel. So we are going to add some gravel back on the road. The road's solid and good shape, but we want to really make sure it can handle the traffic, and then we'll seal coat that portion. Street Matter Road was originally a county highway, and it is already seal coated in very good shape, so we're not going to have any issues with that at all. So.
Since this involves more of Peoria County, you guys, of course, notify all of the safety people and so forth.
Yes, once we get ready to start the work, we'll send notification out to them ahead of time during the design, and then right before construction, we'll let everybody know. Fire, police, ambulance, mail people. So we'll let everybody know. We'll do a big press release, let the schools know.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All those in favor of the adoption of this resolution signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. And our next resolution, we're getting into the spring very quickly with seal coating and so forth. Motion on the resolution here. Motion by Terry, seconded by Matt. Okay, you got it, Amy.
Good afternoon. Some of the, as we spoke in previous meetings, some of the road commissioners go out for seal coating for their roads in the spring about this time of year. Sometimes we have some road districts that opt to go out on their own for seal coating bids as opposed to going with the county's program, which is fine, it's their prerogative. We had 2 townships this spring that wanted to go out on their own and get out early for the seal coating bids. The first one was Millbrook Township. They received 3 bids for their seal coating work, with the low bid being pavement maintenance services. And we are recommending pavement maintenance services for the work this year. Again, this is a pass-through. Township motor fuel tax is pass-through from the county highway department. We help oversee their program for them, and we work with IDOT on their behalf. So we are recommending the low bid that was submitted to us, and happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, Betty.
Amy, when you speak of they go out on their own, is that per a request from someone or?
The road commission, it's the township's money. The county oversees it. So if they can choose if they want to go to a bid letting with the rest of the road commissioners, or if they would like to go out separately on their own, and that's their prerogative.
Their prerogative. Okay.
It looks as though the bid was pretty competitive, especially for the second and third bids. I would think that the road commissioners would be happy with the bids. No other questions? I'm going to call the resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to our next resolution. It has to do with seal coating again. And Amy, you're going to handle that for us? Oops, I didn't get the motion, huh? Thank you. You're awake.
I am.
I haven't bored you. Take a motion on that. Thank you, Betty. Seconded by Dylan. Okay.
This is also
You got it.
one of the road districts that opted to go out for a bid letting on their own. And this is in Hollis Township. Hollis is in the southern part of the county. Millbrook, the previous one, is in the northwest part of the county. In Hollis Township, there were two bidders, and the recommended low bid is Porter Brothers out of Rock Falls. We verified that they have capacity to do the work this year. We are early in the season, so they still have capacity. So we are recommending the low bid of Porter Brothers as per the bid letting that was held. Happy to answer any questions.
Anyone? All those in favor of adopting this resolution signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. We're up to discussion on our Illinois Solar for All program. And Becca, you're going to take the lead on this. Thank you.
So, good afternoon. Following last month's introduction to our initial inquiries about ground-mounted solar at highway and juvenile detention, and also not ground-mounted at Health and Human Services, we continue to look for ways, in the Sustainability Department to make use of the county's Sustainability Plan for Internal Operations does call for an increase in renewable energy, so we're always looking for opportunities to do that. We've continued our work with solar developer Hakatolo, and in the packet you'll find a potential timeline for making use of that Solar for All program, what application process would look like, and then the two locations that we're looking for applying for this year would be juvenile detention and highway. Health and Human Services, there's just too many variables, right, to make application for this year, so we'd be looking at the 2024 application year. And in response to some of the questions that we had last month, the first question that I wanted to answer was regarding community solar. The Cameron Solar Array by Trajectory that's right out close to the jail is still in the process of plan review by Planning and Zoning this month. The cost savings for that community solar would be just 20% off of our rate. So I wanted to answer that question before I turn it over to Jason Hawksworth from Hakatolo. And he's agreed to join us today to explain and answer some questions regarding what a power purchasing agreement would look like compared to outright purchase, and then any additional questions that you may have regarding solar at those two locations. Again, Juvenile Detention Center and Highway.
Questions for Becca?
The pricing for the power purchasing agreement is in the packet.
Yeah.
And I can come up and scroll a bit while Jason explains a little bit more about that.
My only question that I had for you, Becca, was on page 82, says how long do you expect to stay in a location? In other words, if we would buy the contract, what happens to the contract if we used it on a building and decide to sell that building,
The contract is transferable. If you're referring to a power purchase agreement,
yeah,
you could transfer the power purchase agreement to new ownership.
okay.
I know the question was raised related to the highway department specifically and the use of space at the highway department, and what if the highway department were to move or expand or move or anything of that nature. The array itself, if we're entering into a power purchase agreement, that's obviously a scenario where Hakatolo owns the asset and is selling the power to the county specifically. If there were a change in operations, like you wanted to put a building where the array was sitting, there would be a cost essentially to the county at that point, because the theory would be that you would either A, pick that array up and move it to a new location, or B, you could pick that array up, put it on the roof of a building if you were constructing a building. But I think there are certainly options, but the impact of those options are potentially added cost to whatever project the county is considering at that time. Furthermore, if you were to shut down an operation in its entirety, you have an array that's attached to the electrical infrastructure of that facility. Ultimately, there are options for becoming what's known as a qualifying facility, which is a different designation with Ameren. As long as a meter is maintained at that facility, those are mitigation options for an array if you were to shut a facility down. Excuse me. But the biggest thing is that outside of that particular option, there would be potential for added cost.
Thank you. Now, because I was thinking about my question, I wasn't paying attention to Becca. I'd like to have you, for the record, state your name and position.
Oh, yeah. Becca Cottrell, Sustainability Coordinator.
No, I'm talking.
Oh, Jason's. I was like, okay.
I know who you are. Becca, I know who you are. I said because I was
So, yeah.
I was busy thinking about my question when Becca introduced you.
I'm sorry. My name is Jason Hawksworth, and I'm the manager for Hakatolo.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. I'll recognize you.
Yeah. So I think obviously we're Hakatolo by way of background is a local Peoria-based solar developer, and the primary function that we've performed over the first 6 or 8 years of our existence has been to do these power purchase agreements. Our primary function was. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. The primary function has been that we worked primarily with tax-exempt organizations, and the theory is that tax-exempt organizations historically couldn't take advantage of tax credits because they're tax-exempt, right? And so our role was to own and operate the asset for the purpose of monetizing the tax credits and then providing the benefit back to the nonprofit or tax-exempt organization through a reduction in their energy costs. And so we've presented a very similar power purchase agreement option here for the county, but over the last 6 months, some things have changed, and this relates back to the Inflation Reduction Act, which passed in August. And the Inflation Reduction Act, one of the major changes that occurred within the industry is that nonprofits or tax-exempt organizations now can take the investment tax credit by a cash payout from the federal government. So that changes things a little bit, and so ultimately what it does is it creates potential options for organizations like Peoria County. And so the two scenarios that we're presenting today is one, a power purchase agreement, simply because even in a power purchase agreement, sometimes that's still desirable given the fact that you have zero out-of-pocket costs. The out-of-pocket costs are managed by Hakatolo. And Hakatolo, as I mentioned, is a Peoria-based organization, and we also have developed some investment partners, which are local and regional banks, Peoria-based banks. So most of our investment comes from banks within the Peoria community. And so we're considering both a power purchase agreement and a outright purchase option for both the juvenile detention center and the highway department. As Becca mentioned, the Peoria County Health Department is also in consideration, but given the current status of construction of that project, we've decided that it's best to wait until we have some more information, and that would be a 2024 submission into Illinois Solar for All. Illinois Solar for All is the state program that manages solar renewable energy credits. So in legislation passed in I believe 2021, which was the Clean Energy Jobs Act in Illinois, it put forth a mechanism for incentivizing solar assets in the state, whereas the utilities within the state, which are investor-owned utilities, and given the fact that we are a deregulated state, they have to, their requirement to meet their mandate for renewable generation within the state is to buy these solar renewable energy credits from project owners, whether it's developer or individually owned. And Illinois Solar for All, more specifically, is a program within the IPA's general program that targets environmental justice communities. And environmental justice communities are communities that can be either low income, impacted by general environmental impacts and things of that nature. And the Juvenile Detention Center and the Highway Department just happen to be located in what's known as an environmental justice community. So therefore, the incentives are a little bit greater in those situations. So we would look to utilize, whether we do a power purchase agreement or a purchase option, we would look to utilize Illinois Solar for All as the program for selling our SRECs in the state. And then obviously the investment tax credit at the federal level is the other half of the incentive package. So these funds would work to pay down the investment, and I guess additionally with the Illinois Solar for All, the other piece that's kind of critical component is that because these are environmental justice communities, even in a power purchase agreement, is our requirement to save the county a minimum of 65% over the life of the asset. So our power purchase agreement is structured such that we save the county 65% over the life. And so we've done several of these Illinois Solar for All projects, some of which were city and or municipal projects, and that is the intent every time to save 65%. So on the next couple of pages of what we'd presented previously are some pictures of general initial ideas and concepts of where the solar arrays would be located. I'm not sure if you have any questions related to that, or. And then on the last couple of pages, there are cash flows that are that show both PPA cash flow and a cash purchase cash flow for each individual project. The critical component again with the cash purchase means that there's an outlay of cash from the county's perspective at the very beginning of the project to purchase the construction, and then 40% of that would be returned through the investment tax credit, and 40% is a function of the investment tax credit standard is 30%. We are assuming 40% because we would utilize U.S. made products, and there's a 10% adder on the investment tax credit related to the use of U.S. made products. At least 40% of all manufactured goods would be manufactured in the U.S. So that's your 10% adder. That's how we came up to a 40% tax credit. And we could talk a little bit more about that as we go along here, but that's the first payback, and then the second incentive piece is the Illinois Solar for All application and the incentive value related to that. So, and the power purchase agreement would, again, mean no cash outlay to the county. We purchase the asset, we put it on county grounds, and then we sell the power to the city, or to the county at a minimum of a 65% reduction of your energy costs. So with that, I can open it up to questions. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Jason? Jim?
Jason, maybe I'm misreading this, or explain it to me a little bit better. So the 40% tax credit, but like the JDC one, you have the cash flow for the power purchase, but then on the purchasing, so it's estimated cost 1.3 to build the struct thing. I know you don't get the money until after it goes online, but is that saying the incentive that the county would receive back is 1.2 million in tax credits? But you said 40%, so I'm not.
That's tax credits and SRECs combined. Sorry.
Okay, so basically at the end of the day, it would only cost the county. You have to outlay the 1.3 million.
Yep.
Once it's on generated, 100,000. Plus we receive the benefit of the power, because this is basically behind the meter. It's not going into the grid.
That's absolutely correct. It is behind the meter. Yep, and your description is correct.
Okay, and then so all right, that understands that one. And so then all these outflows only have year 10, because I know in some of the development agreements, the developer either then gives it to, or there's a purchase agreement. So if we do a power purchase agreement, estimating that 25 years for the panels, what's happening in year 11 through 20 or 11 through 25, or after 10, are we responsible for demolition, reclaim? Can you get into all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the power purchase agreement, which is the guiding document to this relationship, it can take a couple of different shapes. So in the industry, the standard agreement is roughly 20 years. We're typically somewhat ambivalent to the time frame, although we would want a minimum of 10. We have never done a 10. We've done a 15. We've done a 20. And what happens is that the critical component here is that we would have to own it for a minimum of 5 years. And the reason that is because the tax credit has a recapture period, and that recapture period is 5 years. So as long as we own it for 5 years, then the tax credit recapture becomes a non-issue, and then we could sell it. And typically these projects are sold at well, there's two ways you can calculate fair market value according to the IRS's regulations. One is by having an appraised or an arm's length transaction, or two is you can net present value the future cash flows that are associated in that agreement. So if after year 5, there's still, if it's a 20-year agreement, there's still 15 years left. So we would net present value those last 15 years worth of cash flows, and then we could determine that that's fair market value and then sell it to you for that value. The good thing about Illinois Solar for All is that in that regard, the purchase price for the electricity is cheap, because we got to save you a minimum of 65%, right? So those net present value cash flow buyout options are usually pretty attractive. That said, we could sell it to you at year 5, year 10, year 15. It really is again, we're ambivalent. We're just going to net present value the cash flows at that point. If you come to us at year 12 and said we wanted to buy it, then we would just net present the cash flows that will remain, and then we would sell it to you for that value. If we were to live out the entirety of the agreement, so if it's a 20-year agreement, at the end of year 20, there are a couple of options. Number one, you can extend the agreement. The panels typically have 25, 30-year warranties and will produce power for 30 to 40 years plus. They degrade over time, so that's potentially the only downside is that those warranties of 25 years typically state that the panels are still producing 80% of their originally rated output. So if you're 80% at year 25, you know, by 30 or 40, you're getting down into the 60% range of its originally rated output, which means you're not getting as much energy out of the modules. But if we complete the agreement at year 20, you can either extend it, which is a viable option. You can purchase it at that time, and that would just be whatever the fair market value is at that point. Or you could say, we're done with it, you got to come get it, which is in that case is our responsibility. If you purchase it, then you're correct. It becomes the county's responsibility to operate it, maintain it, and then potentially get rid of it at the end.
So would it be safe to say if in year 10 we decided to purchase it, fair market value would be way more than $100,000?
I would say, well, it obviously depends on what project you're referring to, but I would say probably not way more.
No.
Maybe, I'm guessing here because I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I could run those numbers pretty quickly for you. But if I were to guess, based on past experience, you're probably looking at 100 to 150, at the most maybe 200.
So I know the allowing us to receive the tax credits is fairly new.
Yep.
So how many, have you seen a percentage of governments starting to want to start purchasing so they can receive the tax credits? Because before the last bill, it was not an option.
Right. I would say I haven't seen a tremendous amount of activity in that direction as of yet, typically because some of the value in these transactions is not having to maintain it or not having to deal with any of the work that's related with, you know, long-term operation of the asset. I will say it's a little bit more of a consideration. I haven't seen anybody move in that direction yet, but the law is not even 6 months old, and secondarily, the rules for which how the new tax credit is going to play out haven't been written. So some of the questions like, you know, how soon will I receive my incentive, really hasn't been answered. I think the assumption is that it would be less than a year because you know, tax processes are usually a year long, give or take. You got to file your taxes every year, so I would hope they wouldn't extend that out 2 or 3 years. The belief is that would be within 1 year. What's the process look like, and then are there any restrictive rules? It's yet to be determined. The IRA passed, obviously, and some of the rules related to prevailing wage and some of the other aspects of the law, some of that guidance has been kind of coming out sporadically. But as far as what rules may exist or apply to these types of transactions, it hasn't been fully determined yet. So right now, like I said, I'm seeing people still steer towards a power purchase agreement just for ease of operation and not having to deal with it as much. And secondly, because some of the rules are still, but what will the future hold? I don't know.
I'll let somebody else, but I still have more questions. If
Other questions? Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
How long have you guys been doing this as like a whole business? And is there any other municipalities that have done this for any period of time yet at all?
Yeah. The Village of Deer Creek, we've done a couple of projects with them. Our first one with them being in 2016, obviously on a much smaller scale for the Village of Deer Creek. And they actually we just achieved the 5-year mark for the project that was built in 2016, and they purchased the asset. So we've completed the entire cycle with the Village of Deer Creek. A lot of our other projects that you would say on a larger scale, either this size or larger, have mostly been school districts. So not municipalities per se, but other taxing bodies, I guess. We are preparing to start construction on an Illinois Solar for All project for the city of Decatur for their civic center. That is we literally just last week got approval through Illinois Solar for All for that project. But I think to answer your question, most of the projects that would be similar to this have been school districts. The Tremont High School, Midwest Central, both their high school and primary school, Germantown Hills, grade school, Cambridge High School and grade school. So yeah, mostly school districts more so than municipalities. But Deer Creek has two. Actually, they have three projects. One for their wastewater, one for their freshwater, and one for their community center.
Is the return getting better as time goes on for the investment, or is it tightening up?
Well, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, frankly. The pricing of modules and equipment was coming the way of the investment for quite a while, and then obviously over the last well, there's a ton of factors related to supply chain issues, some of which was, I guess, related to the COVID timeframe. Some of it was related to some other factors internationally for panels that were coming from other countries. And so, and the tax credit for a long time was actually a diminishing tax credit. It started out at 30%, went down to 26. It was slated to go down even further, and then was re-upped back to 30 as a part of the Inflation Reduction Act. So for a while, up to probably 2020, things were coming our way from an investment standpoint. 21 and 22, we had a hard time. We had a hard time making projects pencil, but I think things are starting to come our way again. The other thing that occurs is the incentives from the state were kind of diminishing incentives, and they've kind of stabilized in the last 6 months or so since CEJA passed. So I guess to answer your question is the investment is starting to go back towards heading towards a quality investment simply because incentives have stabilized both federally and state, and pricing has kind of hit a peak and is starting to, I think, come back to a lesser degree, or to a smaller. Inflation is slowing and reducing.
Sharon, I know you're there on the line. Do you have any questions?
No.
Jim?
Jason, so I know Hawkatolo is a fantastic local company, and that your reputation, I mean, everybody I've ever known that dealt with you has nothing but great things to say. But when you talk about selling this asset after 5 or 10, does the contract and a power purchase agreement, is it only between us, or can Hawkatolo sell that to an out-of-state firm in year 7 and we don't even know who we're dealing with anymore?
So to answer your question, technically we could sell it, yes. There's some language within the agreement itself, and the agreement could be, there are pretty specific parts of the agreement that are critical for protecting the tax credit itself. But as far as whether or not first right of refusal or some sort of language to protect the county in that regard could be utilized. But I think to answer your question, yes, we would have the right to sell it if that were to be the case. I can also tell you that would not be our intent. Our intent is to maintain as many of these projects as we can, and we try to structure these deals at the beginning based on the goals and objectives of the organization. So if the county were to say, hey, we do want to own this, then we can structure it in such a way that we can try to maximize the county's dollars because of the flexibility within the agreement, and utilizing fair market value and things of that nature. We would be able to structure it to kind of maximize the county's dollars should you choose to own it at a later date, especially if those discussions occur at the beginning.
So I know as there's a difference between you owning it and us owning it. So if we would own it and you being the developer, does that mean after it's developed, you would still maintain it for us and handle contractually stuff? Or can you get into, even if we entered into a power purchase agreement, I know there's not as much maintenance what the maintenance looks like between us owning it or you owning it, or is it something we don't ever have to worry about if with you own it? Or can you just walk through the differences of that?
Yeah, no, great question. So yes, in a power purchase agreement, we own it, right? And typically these are fenced in when they're ground mounts like this. And so everything within that fence would be our responsibility. Grass, and we would probably utilize a low-growth pollinator-friendly habitat within the fence perimeter. But as far as maintaining and operating the asset, that's 100% our responsibility. You would have access, the county would have access to, all the production data, all the online portals and access to all the information. But the responsibility to maintain it would be 100% ours. If you execute some sort of a purchase option at either within the power purchase agreement or from the very beginning, once you purchase it, then maintenance of the asset and the grounds would become the responsibility of the county. Now we could talk about whether or not you wanted to continue some sort of relationship with us, or whether you could manage it in house, or use your existing grounds maintenance group to manage it and things of that nature. All of that stuff could be talked about at a later date, but you are correct. Under a power purchase agreement, the maintenance and operation of the asset is our responsibility. Under an ownership scenario, maintenance and operation of the asset is the county's responsibility.
I know you've been doing this for a while, so how long in your developments and as you're maintaining them, do you see panels go bad that you would have to replace them, like percentage of panels?
So I've the first project I built wasn't a Hocatolo project. My original business was I was just building residential and small commercial projects. And the first project I built was in 2010 probably, and I've never replaced a module. Other than modules that were hit with lawnmower rocks or something of that nature that were broken because of outside forces. But we've never replaced a module that was inoperable because it had a warranty-related issue. Inverters we have replaced. Inverters do have obviously the tremendous amount of technology in an inverter, and there's some things that can go wrong in an inverter. And we typically plan for somewhere around year 15-ish that we would replace the inverter. But from a cost perspective, the inverter is a relatively reasonable part of the equation from a cost perspective.
So when you would build a larger scale one, do you have to take insurance policies out on this for, like, if a major hailstorm came through or tornadoes? Because I don't guess that would be data that we would need to see whether or not, okay, yeah, it only costs us $100,000, but we're also now have an insurance policy that when they own it versus the risk versus reward total package type.
No, that's a really good question. So from an insurance perspective, under a power purchase agreement, we would carry property and liability. So obviously property would be the hailstorm example. Liability would be if something occurred to the array that impacted county property or neighboring property or something of that nature. So we would carry property and liability. The county, even in a power purchase agreement, the county would have responsibility for, liability of your grounds should something happen to the array. So in other words, if there were a fire that was caused by county operations of some sort that impacted the array, then your liability would come into play there. And so typically we see some organizations have adequate liability already in place that, and we just you just add the concept that there's a solar array on that should be covered under an instance of liability. Sometimes we've seen organizations that had to increase their liability coverage slightly to make sure that they could handle liability that impacted an array and or other neighboring aspects. But so your liability would probably see minimal, if any, impact on it under a power purchase agreement. Under ownership, then you have property insurance and liability insurance. Typically we see a cost of anywhere between 5 and 10 cents a watt per year for all of the insurance requirements that we have.
I keep saying last question, but so on the one on the jail site where there's about 12 rows.
Yep.
And then we have that piece of property that goes out to the main road there. Now, is there a reason why it was just those 12 rows, or it wouldn't have gone even farther down the property? Is it the kilowatts need to be a certain size to fit in to the tax credits that we're going for, or just how did it get decided for that space?
We sized it based on the usage needs of the facility. So we're targeting 85 or 90% offset of the total needs for that facility. In order to achieve the offset that we were targeting, that's the size of the array.
So that would offset 85, 90% of the juvenile detention center just from those panels? And then I think you said it earlier, there was one for the sheriff's department, for the jail too, but we didn't bring that one forward today?
We did not look at the jail.
We did not look at the jail? Because wouldn't that be our largest, probably one of our largest power per courthouse? And I'm just getting at, in today's environment with these tax credits or companies like Hakatolo that are willing to do this, anything that we can do to decrease our footprint with a bill, we'd be silly not to take advantage of it, because these tax credits won't be around forever. Once this gets up and running, there won't be any tax credits probably in another 10 years per se that you wouldn't need it anymore.
Anyone else? We have attending our meeting today another member of the county board, Mr. Ricker, who has, I think, knowledge. Would you like to ask any questions, Mr. Ricker? Thank you. Okay, Becca and Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chairman, so
Yes.
Scott, can you lay out what our next steps, or do you need like a nod from board members that this is something to proceed to try to choose, or staff needs to do some deep dive and recommendations to bring something, or what's next steps?
Great question, Mr. Dillon. I think from the staff's perspective, next step one is hopefully a consensus from the committee that we want to continue down this path versus just completely abandoning it. Only a couple of you spoke, so I'm hopeful that there's a consensus to continue. I think our next step would come back next month with a recommendation on whether or not to do a power purchase agreement or to own ourselves, and then that would, in part of that recommendation then would entail, depending on how it's structured, a contractual relationship with Hakatolo for these two projects. And then we would, then based on the schedule, the estimated schedule that's on the last page of the committee packet, then we would look to follow that schedule, which at the end of the day means that construction would be April, starting in April of next year. So when the weather breaks next year, we obviously have to look at a couple other things. The array for the JDC is on land that we're farming currently. That contract with the farmer, this planting season is year 2 of a 3-year contract with them. So we would, if we choose to put that array in that location, we might have to modify the agreement with the farmer, but that's obviously something we can do. That's not a heavy lift. So there's all those other little things. There are deadlines with the state to get into the program, which is why we're, as Jason and Becca talked about earlier in the presentation, that's why we're going to put the HHS campus in next year's queue, because there isn't enough. We're not at a place yet where we're able to actually make a good application for Illinois Solar for All for that project. But these two are far enough advanced that we feel like we can. I'm going to ask Jason to remind myself and the committee as to when the deadline is for this current round of Illinois Solar for All. That way we can kind of have that in mind as we prepare some type of relationship based on the direction we go with Hakatola for these two projects.
Yeah, so the Illinois Solar for All application period is an annual procurement period. It typically occurs in June or July of every year. And so the intent would be to, and the application for Illinois Solar for All is a pretty healthy undertaking, just by way of information. So we would like to have the application complete and ready to submit in the April-May timeframe. But interconnection is a big factor here, because interconnection with the utility typically takes upwards of 90 days, and it's a requirement to submit into Illinois Solar for All to have an approved interconnection agreement with the utility. So we would want to start that as soon as possible. And so I think whatever resolution, as soon as that's passed, I guess, if it does pass, then we would want to go straight into interconnection application with the utility, and then everything else can fall off after that.
Mr. Dillon?
So Jason, on that interconnection agreement, so we're probably not that far away from having the trajectory projects go over there that I think we're first in the queue. So this doesn't affect the lease agreements that we have for those two projects?
It shouldn't. I mean, so their projects are, my assumption is they're already in the queue, to your point. So what Ameren will do is say, okay, the capacity at this location is X. We already have, 2 projects in the queue, which reduces the capacity to Y, and then our projects would have to fit in that capacity constraint. So it shouldn't, but might be worthy of a confirmation with trajectory.
Personally, I'd give a green light to our administration and its staff.
Mr. Chairman, for the reasons outlined by Jason today, staff would most likely lean towards the power purchase agreement option. But if the committee feels strongly about us, being the owner, we'll certainly pursue that. But I would lean toward, at this point, towards recommending the power purchasing agreement option or direction.
I personally would like to see both of the numbers laid out for us, just so that we have which I know Administrator Sorrell will do.
Other comments? Terry?
Mr. Chairman, by the way of looking for consensus, I would agree. We need to continue down this path. We need to look at the development agreements in both forms, as Jimmy mentioned, and I think we have an opportunity before us that won't last forever based on the tax credits. So we need to continue forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, while we were sitting here, I sent a quick text message to Trajectory, and our two projects are currently number 1 and number 2 in Ameren's queue on this circuit.
Do others have any comment? Betty?
I am not, again, like I said once before, I'm not against solar at this particular facility as well. I would, again, agree with Jimmy that I'd like to see more numbers laid out with more clarity. Again, that particular trajectory that we spoke of, the power of purchase agreement, I like that, and so I'd like to see more of that. And furthermore, the discussion on this. But again, I'm not against the solar at that particular facility, but just like to see us do some more detailed information, bring some more information, more clarity, and numbers.
Thank you.
I guess the only thing I think we need to continue. The only other thing that I got is how come if we're going, why not do more at one time? So why is the jail? Why is more not all? Do it all. I mean, bigger while we do it.
These are the two locations we started with. A lot of efficiencies have already come into place at Juvenile Detention Center, but yes, the jail is the second largest. We're just looking for a location to place the panels, but I certainly can look into that. The courthouse, as discussed last time, not really an option just because of shadow. So we'd be looking for community solar for location like the courthouse.
Jim?
Jason, you've also done quite a bit of roof-mounted solar, correct? So just by your early assessment, I know we have a project in queue for some of the jail. When you look at the picture, the rubber roof versus the old rock roof, but wouldn't that be enough flat roof potentially to put solar on that?
Are you talking about at the jail or
At the jail.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of roof space there, but it's also kind of, I guess, piecemealed, or I don't know if piecemeal is the right word, but there's definitely a lot of obstructions and a lot of different roof sections, and although potentially a viable location, and I'm not sure the age of that roof either. It looks fairly new in the picture, but and it looks like there's some sections that may still be older, but I don't know how old this picture is. But even with the piecemeal arrays that we could put on that roof, my guess is the roof probably would not get to that 85 to 90% range. You'd still be looking for some ground mount to supplement the rooftop. But I guess to answer your question, I would not be opposed to a rooftop array, but even though that's a lot of roof square footage, it's not all very usable just because it's a lot of different roof sections. Each roof section has to have a fire path around the outside edge, so each roof section would be shrunk just based on fire paths and so forth. And then you've got a lot of heating and ventilation units and ventilation units up there. So, and I'm just guessing, to be honest with you. I don't know what the usage is there, but my guess is you would be far short of that 85-90% offset range where you would look to supplement it with ground mount anyway.
Steve? Can you guys speak up just a little bit?
So he was asking if if potentially a jail array could be adjacent to the JDC array that's proposed. And again, it would be on that farmland, and it would just be pulling that out of production, and then, you know, it would be a little longer reach, but not too far to get to the jail, if the solar panels are close enough, right? So it is a possibility. We can look into that. Any additional questions?
Any more comments? Okay. I think, Scott, you and your staff can go ahead and pursue this as the committee would like to have you. And if you can get us figures on both situations, we would most likely have you do that.
We will do that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Again, thanks for coming today. Okay, moving on. Let's see. I think we're just about miscellaneous, are we? Nope, public comment. Do we have any public comment? See no one or any written thing to have us read. We'll move on to a miscellaneous. Anybody for good and welfare of our county or this committee, so forth? Being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.